Is Jessica as grown up as she thinks she is? Let's find out in Sweet Valley High number 5, All Night Long. Hi everyone, I'm Rosie Blythe. I'm the author of the Princess Guide to Life book series, and on this channel we talk about everything from spirituality to finances to everything in between. And right now I'm continuing my little series on Sweet Valley High, everyone's favourite 1980s nostalgia. So All Night Long, I have to say this cover and title, a little bit raunchy. This was definitely a book that I did not leave lying around when I was reading it when I was like 12, 13. And to be perfectly honest, I was pretty careful to not leave it lying around this time when I was reading it. It's actually a little bit saucier than I even realised, because I always thought she's wearing a bikini on the cover, but on closer inspection she's actually wearing what looks like a denim shirt over that bikini, and it's actually kind of falling off. So her clothes are coming off basically, and it's so hot right now, so this is about as close as I'm going to get to wearing a bikini for one of these videos. And we also have the original photo for the cover art, which shows what the height gap actually looks like if you go for guys who are over 6 foot. I think on the final cover, if Jessica is 5'6" and Scott is only maybe 5'10", and it looks better to me, just purely aesthetically. No offence to anyone who has a big height gap with their partner. At the beginning of this book, we have the setup. Jessica is planning a date with this guy, Scott. She says, "Do I look sophisticated enough for Scott?" And Elizabeth replies, "Brooke shields your nod." So nice 80s reference to kick off there. And it turns out Jessica is planning on going to this party at the lake, which her mother has already banned her from going to because she said Scott is too old. So Jessica tells her mother that her friend Cara has invited her out for the day, which is true, but Jessica's not going out with Cara. Oh no, she's going to the party at the lake. And Elizabeth is determined not to get dragged into this. And being Elizabeth, she kind of fancies herself as a bit of a wit. So she writes herself a note: "May a band of wild pygmies hang me by the thumbs if I let Jess get me involved in this." She's gonna let Jess get her involved in this, obviously. So we get a reminder that they are the same size, a perfect 6. No other sizes are perfect. And we have the first outfit description. "This halter top would look really sexy with my red shorts," Jessica said, holding up a scrap of lacy white cloth. And she's borrowing this from Elizabeth, so I'm actually quite surprised that Elizabeth would have anything in her wardrobe that was anything like a scrap of lacy cloth, but maybe she's a bit of a minx on the quiet, who knows. So Jessica is saying that Scott is 18, but Elizabeth suspects she'd conveniently shaved a year or 2 from his real age to convince her parents he wasn't too old for her, which failed anyway. Which sounds pretty likely. I think most 16-year-old girls, if they want to go out with an older guy with their parents' approval, they're probably gonna kind of like fudge his age a little bit. But Elizabeth is worried about Jessica going to a party with college kids because she's heard stories about wild parties. Her best friend Enid's cousin had been to one. It was a kind of grown-up pyjama party, she'd reported, with everyone wearing nightshirts and nightgowns and the floor strewn with mattresses for them to sit on. I'm not sure that I've ever been to a party quite like that. And actually I did hang out with some American college kids in their dorm once, so I guess they would save the pyjama party for another time. Jess goes off to this party and Elizabeth just heads off to the beach with her friend Enid. And Enid says, "Why are you worrying about this?" basically. And Elizabeth says, "I haven't done anything wrong yet. I just hope my mum doesn't get suspicious and ask me for the truth." And Enid, very sensibly, says, "So, if she does, tell her." And it's interesting here because it says there's no love lost between Enid and Jessica, not after the low-down rotten trick Jessica had pulled, blah blah blah, that we know. That was book 2. Which is interesting because at the end of book 2, Elizabeth kind of refuses to confess to Enid that it was Jessica, so I don't know if we just take it that she did tell her later or Enid just knows anyway, but apparently Enid does know it was Jessica now. And then Elizabeth's boyfriend Todd shows up. He's described as a lean yet muscular boy with seal brown hair. Now, I've never actually heard anybody describing hair as seal coloured before, but I quite like that. I feel like we could use more animal comparisons in colour, like maybe kitten ginger hair, for instance. Anyway, Elizabeth is even lying to Todd about where Jessica is, or at least when he says, "Where is she?" and she's like, Enid says, "Oh, she's with Cara." But then Cara blows Jessica's cover because she is at the beach. So Elizabeth goes up to her and is like, "Aren't you meant to be with Jessica?" And Cara says, "Oh, we had car trouble, so we didn't go on this trip that we were meant to go on." And Elizabeth's like, but what about Jessica? What if she gets found out? And Kara's like, she's a big girl, she can deal with it. So Elizabeth is actually the only person who thinks that Jessica needs to be bailed out from all her self-made problems. So we cut to Jessica at the party. We have another reference to Bo Derek in the movie 10. There's another girl in her chamois bikini and cornrowed blonde hair. The girl was a dead ringer for Bo Derek. And we also have an unnecessarily bitchy description of a tall leggy blonde named Greta. Her smallish brown eyes were heavily outlined with charcoal eye pencil, making her nose seem longer than it was. She reminded Jessica of a guinea pig she'd once had. So I guess anyone who isn't a Wakefield or one of their close friends, we're going to be kind of nasty in the descriptions of them. So, okay. And the other college girls warn Jessica that Scott has a bit of a reputation. And she's like, a reputation for what? His eyes were the same metallic blue as the lake and had a slightly devilish glint in them. Droplets of water clung to his moustache and his hair stood out in dark, wet ringlets. He was no more muscular than boys her own age who worked out with weights in the gym, but there was a man-like hardness to his bronzed build she found dangerous and exciting. Now, when you're reading this when you're like 12, you could be forgiven for thinking, oh yeah, 18-year-old boys, they're so like manly. I grew up with a lot of teenage boys in the house. I had an older brother who was 4.5 years older than me, so there were always a lot of boys, you know, taking up space, eating our food, that kind of thing. So I think I grew up with less of a idealised version of teenage boys in my head. But I have to say, when I was 18, I don't really remember there being any super muscular guys. I don't know, maybe they do more working out these days. And you kind of think, oh yeah, because 18-year-old boys, they're so like manly, aren't they? But then when you look at the cover, and there is this picture of these two guys who are, I think they're 17, who are twins, coincidentally, and they look like mid-30s. I've just realised in finding this photograph, it just came up on an article about people looking older in the past, and whoever captioned it claimed they were 17, but I don't know if that's true, but I think it's believable. So I think people in those days did just look older. So it actually isn't that ridiculous that Scott is like this, you know, sort of Burt Reynolds type. Just going back to Burt Reynolds, he always gets a mention. We learn that Jessica is normally in control with boys, and it says she liked the feeling of power it gave her to lead them on, then whirl away with a careless laugh over her shoulder just when they thought they had her. But she's like, I might not be able to get away with that with Scott. And she's worried because she hears the others kind of talking about how she's jailbait and the young ones are all tease and no tickle. So in an attempt to appear sophisticated, she comes and throws mud at Scott. I'm not quite sure why. But anyway, he picks her up and carries her off to like a cabin in the woods. And she's a little bit like, uh-oh, we're going to be alone. And then it says he was kissing her in a way that told her he meant business. The muscles she'd admired on the beach felt knotted and menacing now. So we're all like, uh-oh, what's going to happen next? And she tells him to stop, and he does. And then he's just like, oh, well, you can find your own way home, essentially. And she says, if you don't take me home, I'll tell my parents you tried to. She couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence. And Scott is just like, go ahead, Jessie, baby, tell them. Tell them how you lied to them so you could sneak up here with me. Tell them how you just happened to be in a deserted boathouse, practically naked, when I came along and tried to take advantage of you. Sorry, baby, it just doesn't wash. So yeah, so basically, I think this is meant to be Jessica's comeuppance for, you know, lying to her parents and sneaking off. I think we're meant to kind of get the moral message that that's a bad thing to do. But it could have been a lot worse. And this is meant to be like a light-hearted little series, but I do find myself quite horrified at the messaging in these books because, you know, we have this situation where Jessica does just go out with men, basically, and assumes that she can just kiss them and then, like, that's it, and she can just say no more than that, and they'll be like, okay, fine. And then they are pretty much like that. I mean, he tells her, like, oh, find your own way home then. But that's it. It could have been a lot worse. And, you know, I don't mean to be a downer, but, like, I don't think it's great messaging for a book for teenage girls that they're going to be kind of thinking, oh yeah, okay, so I can be like Jessica and just go to deserted boathouses with guys and it will all be fine for me, because it might not be. Anyway, he just kind of walks off and leaves her, and she somehow gets her feet tangled in a rope so badly that she, like, by the time she's got herself untangled, he's out of sight. So she gets lost in the woods. Again, a little bit of Jessica getting her just desserts, I guess. But yeah, it's a very PG just desserts. And she gets to the cabin eventually, and everyone's just like drunk. She like tries to wheedle the car keys out of him, and she can't. He says, if you want a ride home bad enough, there's only one way of getting it. And she says, I'd rather sleep with a grizzly bear. I mean, he's drunk, so it's not like if she did sleep with him, then he'd be like, okay, I'll drive you home now. So it's like, yeah, it was a bad idea to go to this party, basically, is what we're learning. Scott makes a good point here that, like, if you tell your parents that you disobeyed them and did all these naughty things, how are you going to talk your way out of that? And I think, you know, if I had a teenage daughter, I would be like, it doesn't matter what you've done. I don't care about that. I want to make sure that you come home safe. So whatever the situation, no matter how much trouble you think you're going to be in, call me anyway and I will pick you up from wherever you are, you know? Like, safety is much more important than anything else. I think you'd want your teenage daughters or sons to always feel that they were safe to call you no matter what. Anyway, I feel like I'm turning this into a really serious video and it's meant to be fun. So on with the fun. So Elizabeth wakes up Monday morning and finds that Jessica did not come home. Jessica has somehow managed to find a phone, because she currently couldn't find a phone, but she can now. And luckily, it's Elizabeth who picks up and nobody asks her who was on the phone. So Jessica's like, oh, please cover for me. So Elizabeth, like the dunderhead that she is, agrees to cover for Jessica. So Elizabeth will just have a quick outfit description. She had got ready for school in a pair of old jeans, worn to velvety softness, a long sleeve t-shirt, tortoise shell clips on either side of her hair, and a pair of moccasins. So she goes downstairs as Elizabeth, has breakfast, and we have a little bit of the inevitable Wakefield worship when we meet Alice Wakefield, their mum. So before she goes to her full-time job as an interior designer, she's making pancakes for her teenage daughters to have for breakfast. And she'd gotten up at dawn to go jogging, as she did every morning. And her honey blonde hair was caught up in a ponytail, adding a youthfulness to her tan, slender appearance that made her seem closer to her daughter's age than her own. We don't know how old she actually is. I mean, there's no mention of her being a teen mum, so she must have been at least 20. And she has an 18-year-old, so she's late 30s at the very youngest. She's probably more like early 40s. But anyway, at least there's a bit of realism that to look good, she does have to take care of herself and go jogging every morning. To stay slim, she has to go jogging. Because I think sometimes they sort of present people on TV as just like they just slob around, eat donuts all day and somehow have these fantastic figures. And Elizabeth avoids questions by choking on her pancakes. Her mum says, every time that happens you add another grey hair to my head. Elizabeth smiled. There wasn't a single grey hair among her mother's 20 locks. Of course not, because no one's ever gone grey in their 30s. So Elizabeth pretends to go to school and then she sneaks around the side door and sneaks back into the house. I don't know why she just didn't kind of let the front door slam and then sneak up the stairs, but anyway, she makes it more complicated than she needs to, which is Elizabeth's trademark. So then she changes into a Jessica outfit, a short bias cut skirt and matching striped top that was one of Jessica's favourite outfits, and takes the clips out of her hair and puts lipstick and perfume on. And then she goes downstairs and has breakfast again as Jessica. Now I have to say, if you're going to try and fool people into thinking you're the other twin, I wouldn't start with your mum. Like, of all the people in the universe, your mum is going to know, isn't she? I've noticed even identical twins on TV, because sometimes you get them in TV programmes, don't you? I mean, even Sweet Valley High. You can always tell which one's which. There's just like, there's always something that's like a little tell. Like the Sweet Valley High twins, like their eyes are just slightly different shaped, even though they are genetically identical. They're not just like fraternal twins who look really similar like the Olsen twins. You know, I'm just like a stranger watching them on TV. I'm pretty sure identical twins' mums can tell them apart. You know, you'd have to be extremely distracted, wouldn't you? And I guess you wouldn't really scrutinise your daughter if you were assuming that she was who she said she was. Or maybe Alice is as much in denial about Jessica as Elizabeth is, so she's just like, I know it's Elizabeth dressed up as Jessica, I'm just gonna keep looking at these pancakes. I don't know. So Elizabeth goes to school in Jessica's outfit, which kind of seems silly. Like, you'd think she'd get changed into her own outfit at school, but she doesn't seem to. So she goes around confusing everyone, being dressed as Jessica. So they're due to take a test, and it is to become tour guides for the summer, which sounds a very fun summer job, doesn't it? Elizabeth meets up with Enid, and once she's convinced her that, like, don't worry, it's not Jessica, she tells her that Jessica didn't come home. And then Elizabeth's like, the only thing that worries me now is the test. What if Jess doesn't show up when it's her turn to take it? Enid points out that's her problem. She's like secretly smiling to herself, thinking that Jessica's probably got a hangover. And Elizabeth says, Jessie's not really as tough as she seems. The trouble is, I'm in this too, whether I want to be or not. I promised Jessica I'd help. So Elizabeth says, it's not just Jessica I'm thinking of. We planned on being tourist guides together. It wouldn't be the same without her. It's for me too. So as luck would have it, there are 2 different test periods. So Elizabeth's is first and Jessica happens to be in the second one. I mean, there would be no problem if there was just 1 test period with there. She'd just miss it. It's weird because unless it's in one of the books that I don't have, I don't remember them ever actually doing this. I don't think they ever do become tour guides in the summer, do they? Is there a book where they do that? Because I haven't read it, if there is. So it might be another one of those plot strands that just gets left behind. There's also this bit where Elizabeth is in Jessica's outfit and Todd makes a joke where he says, "Oh, thank you, Jessica. You kiss almost as well as your sister." Now, the fact that he did make out with Jessica, it does make me sort of wonder if this would be a joke akin to, you know, Ross saying to Rachel, "Oh, it's like that time we were on a break." Like, it's just never going to be funny. Maybe that's just me. So when Jessica's friend Cara shows up, Elizabeth, as Jessica, tells her a story of what happened. Like, oh yeah, I pushed Scott in the lake with all his clothes on. So she's basically a compulsive liar now. It's just very strange. Cara's like, "Jessica, you're evil," which is true. So she tells Todd all about the situation, that she's nervous that Jessica's not going to make it for the test, and Todd's like, "Oh well, there's nothing you can do about it anyway." And then she's like, Todd is like, you are not going to take the test for her. Like, that's cheating." "It wouldn't really be cheating," she defended weakly. It totally is cheating though, isn't it? Like, I can't believe that Elizabeth, we're always told that she's like this fine upstanding citizen, but it's like, when it comes to Jessica, I mean, one day she's going to just murder someone, isn't she? Like, "Oh, but Jessica wanted me to." Okay, that might be a slight exaggeration. But she and Todd have a fight about this. And she's completely in the wrong. She's like, "The truth is you're jealous because I'm doing something for Jessica." Which is just so stupid. So Elizabeth and Todd have this big blow-up argument and basically break up because Elizabeth won't stop doing, illegal things for Jessica. Elizabeth goes ahead and takes the test as Jessica, presumably in the same outfit that she's been wearing all day. But afterwards she's like, "Oh no, I bombed. I know I did," because I was all crying over Todd. Then we have a little cameo from Dana Larson, who's the singer in the Droids, who always get a mention. They're the school rock band. So we have a little outfit description. Dana was in one of her usual outrageous get-ups. An oversized t-shirt over a red striped miniskirt, purple tights and black suede ankle boots. An enormous gold loop dangled from one pierced earlobe, the other sported a tiny silver star. She's got style, hasn't she? She's like boy trouble, right? When she sees Elizabeth crying. And then she's like, "You're probably better off without him." Elizabeth says, "I think I'm going to be sick." And we also have a little mention of Olivia Davidson, who is always good value, wearing a vibrant purple scarf over her brown curls. It says Olivia was big on things like anti-nuke rallies and organic food. She was always lecturing the newspaper staff in a nice way about eating too much refined stuff. Her lunches invariably consisted of things like whole grain bread, meatless spreads and alfalfa sprouts. She had a loony sense of humour though, which Elizabeth enjoyed. Olivia's ahead of her time, isn't she? And then she mentions that she had a fight with her boyfriend. "How can I have a meaningful relationship with someone who believes in offshore drilling?" She's so funny. She always cracks me up. So Jessica makes it to school in the afternoon just in time for cheerleading. And she's delighted to find that Elizabeth has been lying for her all day. But Elizabeth is just left broken by this day. She says she just lost 2 of the most important things in her life, Todd and her self-respect. And all of this stress was basically for nothing. Because as it turns out, when the test results come back, Elizabeth passed and Jessica failed. So, best Jessica moment, when she yells at someone for the thing that they did to help her. She says, "I'll never forgive you for this." "I knew it. I knew all along you were jealous. I bet you flunked me on purpose just to get back at me. You were jealous because secretly you wanted to go out with Scott. And all along I thought you were doing me this big favour because I was your sweet baby sister. God, how could I have been so utterly naive?" And most Elizabeth moment is when she feels really guilty for helping someone or trying to. So Jessica says, "If you were so sweet and innocent, you never would have pretended to be me in the first place." She's right, Elizabeth thought with a dull shock. It had been wrong from the very beginning. She'd known, yet she'd gone ahead with it anyway. Maybe she and Jessica were more alike than she'd ever realised. Now, we knew the Wakefield twins were very special, but did we know they were literally magic? Because apparently they can change their eye colour depending on their mood.
It says here Jessica's eyes, which normally hovered somewhere between blue and green and could go either way depending on her mood, glittered pure emerald fire. And then a minute later, Jessica's smile deepened into one of pure innocence. Her eyes looked blue as a baby's. Now, my eyes are like a grey-green colour, and they can range from like pretty dark grey to looking sort of quite bright, almost blue-green in strong sunlight. But I'm not aware that they can actually change depending on my mood. But who knows, maybe I've been glittering emerald fire at people without knowing it.
I guess in a way Elizabeth gets a sort of comeuppance in that, you know, she is punished for lying and cheating for Jessica, loses her boyfriend, her self-respect. So after this fight with Todd, Elizabeth just mopes about, and Enid is like, why don't you call him? Because Enid is just like much more sensible than Elizabeth. And she's like, oh, there's no point, I know what he'd say. He never wants to speak to me again. Elizabeth has made no attempts to get back together or apologise to Todd when she was in the wrong. But then she's just like hanging out on the deserted baseball diamond, and Todd shows up out of nowhere and apologises and kisses her. So again, not really great messaging, is it? That when you've had an argument with someone you're definitely in the wrong, you should just do nothing because they will eventually come over and apologise to you. Todd's like, oh, I'm sorry, you were only trying to protect your sister. So Todd is spineless as well. Anyway, things do seem to be on the up because Jessica runs over and she's all excited because she's been given the opportunity to take the test again because the teacher was like, oh, I could see that you weren't well the day that you took it. So Elizabeth crying and being all broken-hearted actually was good for something. So then we have a description of a lovely day at the beach. It was another perfect sunny day. The salty air smelled of suntan lotion and surfboard wax, and there was just enough of a breeze to keep everyone from getting too hot. There's a volleyball game going on. It's all idyllic. It sounds great. We have kind of a slightly dated reference to being sunburnt. We have the hot pink colour of Enid's formerly pale thighs. And I think Enid's kind of like a redhead. She has like bronzy red hair in the pictures. So yeah, I feel like that's hopefully most people now don't get sunburnt because we're aware of the damage that it does. I know I have strap marks, by the way. I'm in no position to lecture anyone. I don't know how much they were aware in the 80s, but I know in the 90s people did know that a tan was a sign of damage because I read my mum's magazine from that era and they were saying it in the 90s, so no excuse. We have a quick little subplot where we are introduced to Bill Chase. There's a surf contest and the favourite to win is this guy called Sonny Callahan, who we never hear from again, I don't think. He must have just left town because he loses to Bill Chase, who is this guy who's in the junior class and he's kind of a loner. A quick mention of Lila wearing a metallic blue one piece and having wavy light brown hair done up in French braids. So I just like to keep my finger on the pulse of the 80s fashions. You don't really get like metallic one colour swimsuits these days, do you? I feel like they're more patterned. Anyway, so Bill wins the surf contest and that's not the last we're going to hear of Bill. Jessica misses the lovely day at the beach because she's got poison oak. Ha ha. I've never actually heard of poison oak. I've heard of poison ivy, but I don't think we get them in Britain. We have a lot of stinging nettles. But yeah, so Jessica has, again, a little bit more of a comeuppance. We also have a mention of them drinking beer, very casually for 16-year-olds. So we end with a very cosy scene around the crackling driftwood fire, and Elizabeth and Todd are there with everyone and they're toasting marshmallows and kissing. It's all very romantic. It's all very like teen fantasy, isn't it? So he's now talking about how great it's going to be when he gets his motorcycle, and she still hasn't told him that she's not allowed on motorcycles. So that is going to be the plot of the next book. So I don't know about everyone's book, but mine ends with looking back at previous books, and also we've got this bonus material. I guess this was from the sort of Bible that Francine Pascal wrote for her ghostwriters to learn from, about all of the backstories of all these characters. I don't really understand why they didn't just put them in the books. But anyway, you get this little bit of background on Bill Chase, who we've just been introduced to as this great surfer dude. It says he's a real California golden boy with wind-tossed blonde hair, summer blue eyes and a deep tan, but he's somewhat of a loner. So we have this backstory where he had this girlfriend that he was madly in love with, who coincidentally looks just like the Wakefield twins. And they had an argument and she got in a car with a drunk driver and died. So he has this very sad past. And then we have a little bit of background on Lila Fowler. Pretty rich, spoiled, and the daughter of George Fowler, one of the richest men in Sweet Valley. So she's a snob, but the truth is that Lila is very insecure. Although she has a sleek, sophisticated image, she feels unloved and neglected. basically because her parents don't give her any attention. It's actually very sad. Mother is living it up in Europe with her jet-setter friends, and a live-in housekeeper is her closest companion at home. And then we have this stuff that doesn't make any sense in the context of any of the books. So first of all, we find out, it says, during one of her mother's infrequent visits, she admitted to Lila that George Fowler isn't her real father. And she doesn't know who her real father is. It says maybe he's someone rich and famous. Her mother used to be a bit actress in Hollywood. So when Lila goes to the movies, she searches the faces of the actors on screen for any resemblance of her. So that's pretty tragic. And also she wants to marry this guy that she knows called Ted Whitlock. And the Whitlocks are old Boston society. Their ancestors came over on the Mayflower. So this is one of those times where Lila is actually the low-class peasant of the relationship. So she doesn't know how that's going to turn out, but she wants to marry Ted. And also she wants to be a professional tennis player. So there's like, they squeeze in all this stuff that we never hear of again in any of the books. So that's weird. So again, I think we've mentioned this before, that whatever Francine Pascal kind of came up with, a lot of it was just dropped and they just kind of came up with other storylines to go with the books. But those are for another day. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today and letting me talk about this saucy little book, which was actually a lot less raunchy than the title and cover would have suggested. So thank you for liking the video, thank you for subscribing to the channel, and I will look forward to seeing you for more Sweet Valley Hive fun in another video very soon. Bye.